A Hot Day in Summer. Written and read for you by SirTenTales. It was hot that day. Emmett hated it when it was hot, but that didn't stop him from sitting on the green in the blazing sun with his laptop open, writing the last few lines of his paper. He should have finished it last night, but some things were just more important. Besides being hot, it was loud. The green was filled with people who had already finished their classes for the week. The rather large patch of grass and trees in the middle of the college campus was like an oasis to the overworked and sun-deprived students. The first hot, sunny day in a month brings out everyone. The dance troupe, the skateboarders, the guitar players and frisbee players. It was loud. But that didn't bother Emmett. It was the close encounters that were annoying sometimes. Emmett narrowly escaped 2 rogue frisbees in the span of 10 minutes. One had whizzed between Emmett's face and his laptop screen. "Sorry, man," a big blonde guy had said as he ran by and grabbed the frisbee from the ground. The blonde guy had already run back to his friends before Emmett even had a chance to recover from that near non-fatal hit. He shook his head, sighed, and kept typing. Almost done. Just a few more words. "Hey, here you are," said a voice, very loud and clear, like cymbals ringing out in an orchestra. Emmett stopped typing. He was hoping he would see her today. He just didn't realize how much he hoped to see her. Before he knew it, he felt that tightness in his chest, that familiar ache that was both painful and wonderful. Cherry plopped herself down next to Emmett. Her long, flowy sundress fluttered down over his feet. She slapped her hands down on her lap, probably intending to have a nice long sit-down with him, which he would be more than happy to oblige her, since any other plans had left his head as soon as he heard her voice. Did she have to look so pretty in her dress, he thought. Though, if he were being honest, he always thought she looked pretty. More than pretty. He would find himself staring at her, admiring her. Today, the dark blue white floral fabric complemented her chocolate brown skin. The sunshine made her seem like she was glowing, and her long braids falling down over her shoulders and back reminded him of the paintings of goddesses, incredible deities filled with light and beauty that filled the pages of his textbooks. "I didn't see you in class this morning," she said. "I was worried you were sick or something. We had a—" She stopped and looked at him more closely. "You okay?" Emmett didn't realize he was just staring at her until she asked her question. His face flamed and he shook his head a little. He hoped to the gods that his cheeks didn't blush as much as he felt like they did. With how pale he was sure he was turning a deep red right then. "Yeah, sorry, I just—" he started to say, then stopped abruptly when he saw her hand move toward his face. He froze. Cherry had reached up and swept a stray lock of thick brown hair out of Emmett's face. "You were working late again," she said. Not really a question, more of a statement. "Yeah, I was," Emmett managed to say, very low and quite strained. She gave him a small smile. "You really need to take care of yourself and let yourself rest," she said. Her hand had returned to her lap and started fiddling with the yellow ribbon ties hanging from her waist. He was still reeling from her touch. How could she be so cool about it, he thought. He felt like his heart was in his throat. "I get that your parents are more than a little," she said as she raised her hands into claws and gritted her teeth. The "parents are crazy, overbearing, and drive me nuts" sign. "But you can't let them get to you and make you crazy." He smiled at her. She gets it. Of course she gets it. Emmett's parents were never the follow your dreams and do what makes you happy kind of parents. As far back as Emmett could remember, he's had to try to strive for something that was constantly out of his reach. No goal or achievement was ever enough for his parents. He got mostly A's, "Why not straight A's?" his mom said. He joined art club. "Why aren't you in Model UN?" his dad said. He got honor roll multiple times. "Why aren't you valedictorian?" they said. He just didn't feel good enough in their eyes. He would have preferred if they just ignored him, if they gave him the cold shoulder because they thought he wasn't good enough. But no. They were the type to tell you what was wrong with you constantly, even if you were trying your best. Oh, sure, he could have tried to go his own path, do whatever he wanted, and burn the rest. But when your normal self is a constant source of ridicule, scorn, and disdain, you tend to downplay yourself as much as possible. Be agreeable. Fly as close to the sun as you can, and you'll be okay. Or at least left alone, hopefully. But not Cherry. She lived her life how she wanted. If she wanted to be weird, then she would happily pick up her golden flagpole and let her freak flag fly. In those first few weeks of college, when he first saw Cherry, she was wearing what looked like an entire Renaissance fair garb, in the middle of the day, on a Wednesday, as she was walking to class. His eyes were fixed on her as she walked past. She looked so happy and confident, like she didn't care that people stopped and looked at her or whispered to their friends. Immediately, Emmett had questions. He wanted to know if she made the outfit herself, if she had gone to an event recently, if she liked Lord of the Rings or Legend of Zelda. He nearly walked into a light post, he was so fixed on her. He thought about her a lot on his way to class, and for the rest of the day, and for the days after that. He wondered if she liked to dress in costume as much as he did. He wondered if she got random people questioning her like he did. The usual question, the "Are you in a play?" question that people asked. Emmett got that question a lot when he was dressed up on his way to an event, sword, shield, and all. He once said to a not-so-nice woman who made it a point to walk up to him, tap him hard on the arm as he was standing in line for the register, "Yes, I'm in a play. I dress in my costume and walk to the store at 9 a.m. because I'm in a play." He said it in a bored voice with a deadpan expression. He had been asked this question countless times, and he was making a point to her that she, and people like her, didn't faze him. Some people standing around them snickered when they heard the exchange. Emmett was particularly satisfied when she gave him a dirty look and walked away in a huff. One guy in the next lane even gave Emmett a fist bump and nod of approval for it. The elaborate fantasy dragon on his shirt let Emmett know that he was one of his kind. "I still can't get through that darn Landstalker game," Cherry said to him. Emmett shook his head and chuckled as he tried his best to keep typing. They had been playing through retro games together for the past few months. Emmett was really good at old RPGs. Cherry, not so much, but she seemed to like to play anyway. She would always talk to him about a game she was frustrated with, and he would happily listen and offer her his vast array of video game knowledge. "It's hard, yeah, but think of the reward when you complete it," he said. "What? A screen that says congratulations spelled incorrectly?" That made Emmett stop typing and laugh, which made Cherry laugh, loud and clear, like she didn't care who heard her. This made Emmett's heart soar, which made him laugh even harder. Emmett wished he could be as confident in himself as Cherry was, especially around his family. But he always seemed to clam up and shrink around them. The third out of 4 children, Emmett wasn't the oldest or the youngest. He was just there. His 2 older siblings seemed to always have his parents' praise, while the youngest always had their adoration. And he The not amazing enough and not cute enough just wasn't enough. He honestly felt like his parents enjoyed letting him know constantly that he wasn't good enough, when all Emmett ever wanted was for them to leave him alone. Cherry understood that feeling more than anyone else. Her parents were the same way as his, overbearing, domineering, trapping. Emmett remembered when she showed up for the first day of the spring semester last year. Her parents had dropped her off that day. Emmett was walking out of the Classics building when he saw her. The Classics building was only yards away from the parking lot, in the front of the campus behind the front gate. He was about to wave to her and say hi when he noticed that she wasn't in her usual happy mood. Her face was sullen as her parents stood in front of her, seeming to read her a lecture for something she had done. Emmett watched as they turned around and walked away, got into their minivan and drove off. No hug, no kiss, not really a warm goodbye. Cherry rubbed her face with her hands, not as if she had been crying, more so as if she were trying to rub her face off. Then she sighed, straightened her back, turned on her heel, and walked down the path toward the Classics building. She saw Emmett on the path and waved so enthusiastically he would think she hadn't seen him in years. Her smile was bright when she walked up to him. "Everything okay?" Emmett asked. Cherry's smile turned sheepish. "I'm guessing you saw that," she said with a weak laugh. There was no point in hiding that he had seen the exchange between her and her parents. Even though there weren't many people around, and no one could really hear what was said between Cherry and her parents, Emmett saw more in her face and in the way she stood than words could have ever told him. "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck with his hand. "You guys looked like me and my parents on my graduation day." Cherry looked at him. Understanding flashed in her eyes. Her smile broadened, and she started to laugh, a laugh that, to Emmett, sounded like relief. She pursed her lips and blew a thin braid out of her face. She offered him her hand, as if for a handshake. He took it, and she shook his hand and said, "Welcome to the same boat, mon ami." Back then, and even now, Cherry did well not to let things get her down. Emmett admired her for it. Right now, she was recounting a story to him and was laughing hysterically. Some people turned and looked at her, and Emmett couldn't stop looking at her. Cherry was amazing, he thought. If only she knew. If only he could tell her how amazing he thought she was, and how much she meant to him. They had been friends since freshman year, and Emmett couldn't imagine life without her. As cheesy as Emmett thought it sounded in his head, Cherry was the sun in his very gray day. Their friendship had sparked from that weird part of his life, that weird part of himself that he tried so hard to hide, the parts that he kept from his parents and siblings so that he could hopefully be left alone to his own devices. Emmett never shared that side of himself with anyone, ever. But she knew about these weird parts of him, and she accepted them. Hell, she shared in the weirdness completely. She was probably just as weird as he was. She was weird and fun and smart and caring and just amazing. Emmett had never met anyone like Cherry. She was the bright spot in his life, and with all his heart, he was sure that he... Church bells rang in the distance, zapping Emmett out of his reverie, and Cherry out of her laughing spell. She wiped her eyes and breathed huge breaths to calm herself down. Then she started and looked at her watch. She turned to Emmett. "Hey, don't you have a class around now?" she exclaimed. Emmett looked down at his laptop clock. It was 11:45. His class started 15 minutes ago. "Ah, shh," he swore, slammed his laptop shut, and forced it into his bag before scrambling to his feet. "I gotta go," he said, and started running through the sunbathers toward the science building. "I'll see you later, okay?" he called over his shoulder to her. He had made quite the distance before he heard Cherry calling his name. "Meet me in the library at 8, okay? We'll go to the shop together," she shouted after him, standing on tiptoe and cupping her hands around her mouth to make sure she could be heard. Emmett made it to the sidewalk surrounding the green before he slowed his pace and turned back toward her without stopping. "Yeah, okay," he shouted back. He waved to her, turned back around, and ran full speed down the path toward the science building. He was so late for his class, his paper wasn't even finished, and he could feel a stitch forming in his side. But he had the widest, stupidest grin on his face, and couldn't bring himself to care about his impending crappy grade.